the more you open to what I would call divine love or unconditional love and the heart center, the more quote unquote coincidences start to happen, miracles start to happen, like a red carpet gets rolled out in front of you. And I love that word synchronicity because I don't think I even knew what the word meant 20 years ago. And I didn't think it was an actual thing. And the more you start to open your heart and go down that path, the more, I don't want to say things get easier, but it is this strange red carpet that gets rolled out, and more your life gets filled with what appear to be coincidences and or miracles, depending on how you look at it.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who's out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode. Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. My name is Bob Nickman. My guest today is John Latta, and we're going to be talking about how he transformed his life after hitting rock bottom in pretty much every single category that you can think of. At first, I want to invite you to visit my website, theexplodinghuman.com. Over there, you can listen to episodes, read synopses, see photos of my guests, little bio on myself. There's a donate button if you'd like to support the show through Patreon. Thank you very much. You can also listen on YouTube at The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman, and there is the Exploding Human Facebook page. As I said, my guest today is John Latta. John has written a very powerful book called The Synchronicity of Love, Stories that Heal, Transform, and Awaken. The stories in his book contain the seeds of potential to change habits, beliefs, and one's deepest assumptions about what is possible and the power to radically transform anyone's life. I really enjoyed talking to John, very earnest, sincere, and it's a fantastic, uplifting story. So here he is. This is John David Latta. Good morning, John. I'm so happy to meet you, and I'm so glad you're doing the show this morning.
Thank you, Bob. Happy to be here.
I was looking over your one sheet, and one of the things that that you're talking about was overcoming very rough times and coming out on the other side, and how you did that. And you've written books, and we're going to talk about all that. But one of the things that I sort of landed on as a young man when I was struggling with certain things, and a middle-aged man, I guess I'm not middle-aged anymore, was that the cavalry isn't coming, that I had to figure it out myself. That was a big revelation. No magic is going to happen unless I change something in myself. And I think that is kind of the thing that some people struggle with. They think if I just hang in, something is going to happen. Hanging in is good, but we have to grab onto something inside and run with that. And you're nodding, so I think that's making sense to you.
Well, it is, and it's funny at the time. So my book begins with everything falling apart in my life. Everything that could possibly go wrong all went wrong at the same time. And, my wife got cancer. I left my very secure job, went out to start my own company, promptly lost a lot of money. And a staggering amount of money. I was in personal debt of $650,000. And in the middle of it all, my wife and I get divorced, and suddenly I find myself with custody of my two kids, 9 and 11, with less than zero money and no way out. In the middle of it all, I had this, I don't know where it came from, this unbelievable terror of death, what I would just call the oblivion of death. And so, like I said, everything seemed to be going wrong at the same time, and I couldn't find a way out. And I'd been stridently anti-spiritual, anti-religious to that point in my life. but secretly reading books about people that went to spiritual retreats and had big transformations. So I signed up for one. And I remembered saying, well, I'm $650,000 in debt. Another 2,000 won't matter. So I went away to a retreat in the desert, and I didn't know, I wasn't conscious at the time that I needed to change something about myself, but I knew my life as I'd lived at that point had expired. And I didn't have a lot of grand spiritual experiences at that retreat. But the first thing I discovered was I didn't realize how much I'd kept people at a distance, and that began the really difficult part of reaching out to others, asking for help, learning to be more vulnerable, and it all began there. But did I know at the beginning that that's what I needed to change about myself? No, but I knew I had I exhausted the resources I had up to that point. Something needed to change.
It's amazing how when stuff goes wrong, it seems to me that I just intuitively have felt that it happens in threes. It's usually like three things. It's like, oh man, I lost my job, I lost my girlfriend, and I'm sick. Whatever it is.
Yeah,
It's rarely just one thing, or maybe it just the other things seem so awful too because the one thing that's happened is terrible. It's funny once you're past it, but when you're in it, it's absolutely, like you said, it's terrifying.
yeah,
Um, what's going to happen to me? I think that's the scariest question that people can ask, and then then you said something interesting. Was I had a terror of death. What do you think that is exactly? What is a terror? What is that terror that some people have, and why did it happen then when those other things fell apart?
that's a great question, Bob. So, first of all, I was raised Catholic, sort of, which meant my mother was a part time Catholic. My dad's side of the family said, well, when you die, you go to feed the worms. And so there was a little conflict growing up about what happens when you die. And then there was an experience when we were going to church when I was young, and my mother, in our Catholic church tradition, a woman had to cover her head before she came and went into church, or it was a sin. One day my mom's walking in without covering her head, and she tells me, well, the church changed the rules. They decided it's not a sin anymore. And I was just aghast. I mean, as a kid, I'm like, I thought God wrote the Bible, and this is the playbook. These are all the rules. I mean, it was written by men, and men can change the rules. And so that started me down a path of just antagonism towards religion, spirituality. I just thought it was all make believe. And so, coming back to your question, I never confronted death. I never thought about it. I'd secretly buried it away, and I don't know where it came from. But suddenly I was just terrified of death, and I didn't know who to talk to about it. I've been so ridiculously anti religious and anti spiritual, it would have been embarrassing me to even ask somebody. But going really, really deeper, and where I'm at today, and it took 3 years after that before I turned around and, you might say, faced death and embraced it. Like tired of running from this thing that I'm so afraid of. And it felt like entire worlds opened up to me. And back to this day, I encourage people, to the degree they can, turn towards the thing they're most afraid of and embrace it. I started reading books about death. I started meditating on death. I started listening to music on death. And I had a whole bunch of just hyper vivid dreams. Like, okay, we're going to tell you what's going to happen. And so I'm of the conclusion that the real fear of death for most people is probably the fear of letting go of their current identity
Mm.
and not allowing it to evolve and grow and change, which that was definitely true for me at that point in my life. And because of all the dreams and visions and inner experiences, I'm at peace with death right now. I don't really know with 100% certainty what lay on the other side, but I've had so many just beautiful experiences, even people visiting me after they've died, that I'm just not afraid anymore. And my own inner understanding now is that life goes on and on and on and on. With this body, not forever. With this identity, probably not forever. Things just keep changing.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful way to put it. I've had similar experience with that. So I much identify with it. And I was thinking when you were talking that a lot of the reason in the past what I was afraid of death is because I wasn't really living the way I wanted to be in
Mhm.
some way. And once I started to say to myself, well, it's going to happen. I used to think, well, it happens to other people, but it's not going to happen to me because it never has. So why would it? And then I think, well, if it's going to happen, then what am I afraid to do uh, now that I'm alive? Because there's a limited amount of time. And I ask myself, and I've done this for a long, long time, when I'm, let's say I'm laying there on a deathbed, which is sort of a romanticized version of how it's going to happen. Um, what am I going to regret that I didn't try? And that's the stuff I got to do. Like, am I going to wonder that to me is worse than trying something and not succeeding at it, whatever that means, is to go, oh, I should have. Why didn't I do that? Now I'm at the end and I didn't do it. And who knows what would have happened. So I guess that is where the idea of certain types of risk come in or adventure. Um, I think that's a really important thing to integrate into life is the fact that it's, circular.
I totally agree with that. And the thing is, I don't think I knew that at the time. I think everybody's brilliant looking backwards. But at the time, I don't think I even knew how much I was limiting myself and not living my life fully. And so part of my journey, starting, when where the book opens, which was about 20 years ago, um, was me stepping into everything that most people would associate with feminine qualities. I
Mm,
didn't know what I'd been missing, and I didn't even know, like, wow, I should go try that. Wow, I'm on my deathbed. I should have tried this and this. I didn't know what I was missing. There's an old saying I love. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know,
yeah.
and that was true of me at the time. But looking back, there was like this beautiful orchestration every step of the way. So I kind of adopted a highly, I hate this term, but masculine persona, and all the things that most people associate with feminine, um, you know, um, asking for help, being vulnerable, being receptive, being a good listener. I've been in management my whole life. I was pretty much always bossing people around, and so I didn't know that that was actually a beautiful path to go down, and I started to. In fact, it's so funny. I'm a single parent with two kids, and I'm hanging out with all the single moms, and they were my best friends for years. And all the single moms that had kids, and so in so many ways, I was discovering a whole other part of myself. And then I think that opened the doors for what I would call the spiritual journey, because my book is full of what I would have probably thought at one point in my life was make believe. Now, and then I started to perceive as miracles. And then I started to realize I think they're available to everyone. It just requires a certain what I call opening of the doors, or I kind of describe, at least my life, I built up brick walls around me, and now I'm choosing to dismantle the brick walls.
For me, those brick walls are built on fear. That's really what
Yeah.
the bottom line comes down to for me. It's like, and then I have to ask myself, what am I afraid of? And then I go, well, so what if that did happen? Then what am I afraid of? Then what am I afraid of?
Yeah.
And when I take it down, it's always I'm going to be destroyed or killed or I'm
Yeah.
going to die. And so if that's but that hasn't happened, it's not going to happen. Probably, I mean, I'm not going to jump off a cliff without some sort of a support system of a bungee cord or a parachute. That would be stupid. To me, fear is the biggest enemy,
Yeah.
and that's where the walls go up.
I totally agree. In fact, I was just talking to my wife yesterday, and she's been a life coach, relationship coach for 13 years now, and she frequently will walk clients down that path of, well, okay, if that happens, then what would happen? And then, well, if that happens, then what would happen? And she says they almost all end up in the same place. Why be alone all by myself, starving to death, living under a bridge? you know. And so there's that root core fear again.
Yeah.
Everybody, some slight variation, but some version of that every time, and then I would die.
And then I would die. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always say, well, what? It's always a bridge. It's always living under a bridge. What if they take the bridge down? Then what are you going to
If I'm in Seattle, I'm going to get really wet.
do? I'm living under a bridge. That's such a funny image to me because of the worst case scenario. It's long as we got bridges, you got a place to stay, my friend.
I got a place to draw on the walls too, a little graffiti, roof over my head, stay dry.
So can you give me like some of the early examples of when you started to see that there was another way to approach the way you were living? Some, as you say, it seemed like a miracle or just an event.
Yeah, so I got two really good examples early on the book, early in my journey. One was, I'm really good at time management. Chop, chop, get it done, staying on task, getting things done, the calendar, the plan. So you can imagine bedtime with my kids. It's like chop, chop, get in bed, read the story, translate out, boom, boom, boom. And so I had started group therapy. And so two things are happening at the same time in my life. I'm in group therapy where most of the time it's all women and two women therapists. So I feel like a man alone. And then at the same time, I started down a spiritual path and I started practicing heart-centered meditation. And anyway, I'm tucking my kids in. And I suddenly remembered the women in the group. John, you're so good at doing. You should try being. Like, what the hell is being? I can't even conceptualize it. What is being? And so I'm tucking my kids and I tuck my daughter in. I go and I tuck my son in. He's babbling away excitedly about his day. And I'm like drumming my fingers like, come on, come on. I got stuff to do. But then I thought, well, maybe I'll just try just listening, like no agenda. I'm just going to really listen to my son. And about, I don't know what it was, maybe 30 seconds into it, Bob, I am overwhelmed by a wave of love like I have never felt in my life before. And I'm like, holy shit, what was that? And I'm in love with my son in a way I've never felt before. And I remember going back to group therapy a lot more humble, like maybe some of these women know something I don't know here. Because again, coming back to that, you don't know what you don't know. And at the same time, the spiritual retreat I went to, I kind of kept in contact with him afterwards. And, the teacher, he went by the name of Brew Joy, really popular, wrote a bestseller in the late 70s, I think in early 80s, and was a really popular teacher in California. He liked to work a lot with dreams and created a dream forum and encouraged everybody to write down their dreams. And so I didn't think I had dreams, but I kind of asked for a dream night after night. Pretty soon dreams started to come. And one of the first dreams I had was right before I was going to go into group therapy. I'm sitting with all the women that are in my group, and they're like, hey, we're going to be peeling shrimp, but we're worried about John. And I'm like, why is peeling shrimp a problem? I love shrimp. And they said, well, peeling shrimp can be painful and messy. And so I didn't get it at the time, but looking back, I could see the analogy was the shrimp with the hard shell. Boy, I was really willing to peel the shell off of others. I did not want anybody peeling the shell off of me. And so that was the beginning of opening to dreams as an avenue for information and guidance. That actually listening to somebody with no agenda is a really beautiful thing.
Listening to somebody with no agenda is a really difficult thing to do and to learn and to practice. Somebody asked me once, are you really listening or are you just getting ready to talk?
That was me for most of my life, Bob, sadly.
No, I completely get it. And as somebody who's interviewing people on this, I have to do both. I'm not getting ready to talk, but I have to really listen to what the person is saying and take it in and let it hit me before I go on to the next thing. And sometimes when they say things, I can't talk. I don't want to talk, but it's part of what I have to do for this. I just want to take it in and kind of sit with it. And, that's a little bit of a tricky thing to practice that and be an interviewer at the same time.
And I totally hear you. I was just talking to my wife about it a couple of days ago saying, I've done, my publisher asked me to get out there and do as many podcasts as I could to promote my book, and thought there would be a good avenue for me. And I said, I've never been a podcast host, but I think my personality is more suited for asking the questions. So, and it's funny, not too long ago, we were taking improv classes online, and I'm actually really grateful for that because I learned improv is really all about listening and tuning into the other person, at least when you're interacting with another person. And I watch myself and others who tend to overthink it. They want to take charge of it. They struggle mightily, but the ones that just roll and it's a really easy back and forth, just tune into the other person, they do great. So I'm getting better, Bob.
Yeah, I can tell. I didn't know you before, but I can see that you've done that kind of stuff. Improv is an interesting thing because it's all about yes and. That's what they talk about. Yes and.
Yeah.
So the yes is the listening, and the and is, well, here, maybe we can go over here. But there's a risk to it because there's no definitive outcome. You don't know what's going to happen. It's like being in a canoe on a river. You're just going, and you've got to trust the current and not fight it. And I guess that's really kind of the way that life works. It's all improv, even though we try to, particularly in the educational system, set up a set of rules that get you to a certain place of success, which is supposed to equal some kind of happiness. And you've proved that that wasn't the case for you. It certainly never was for me. So it's all balanced on the head of a pin.
Ooh, that's a very good description. Yeah, and if you like control like I do, kind of just balancing on the head of the pin and rolling with things, that's been a difficult journey for me. I'm way better than I used to be, but that was a difficult journey.
Yeah, that idea of control. I mean, I would love to be able to control things, but I have never had success at that. You know, I had somebody say to me, my son, he asked me to do something he said, oh, get my sister to do this. Talk to her about this because I want her to do it. And I said, I got to tell you, nobody does what I want. No one. And he started laughing, and it was just a great moment where he backed off on trying to control me, and I turned him down as far as trying to control somebody because he wanted something. It was a good moment. I go, but when I think about nobody does everything I want, and I don't do things that other people want. I just don't, because why would I?
My superpower is taking chaos and turning it into order, but order is just an illusion anyway. So a lot of the jobs I had, it was more like just doing my very best to hold things together, but in no way were everything running in perfect order all the time. There's either a little more order or a little less order.
So you were managing people in a corporation setting?
Yeah. So I've had two jobs my whole life. I applied to bag groceries at a large regional grocery chain when I was 15, and I'm staying for 24 years and managed a whole bunch of stores. And anybody that's managed stores in retail, our typical stores back then had probably between 80 and 100 employees, and there tends to be a fair amount of turnover in the employees, and you have 3,000 customers a day. Trying to keep the store there's an infinite number of things that can go wrong and do on a daily basis.
Sure.
You've got snow scares and, weather changes that changes shopping patterns and people quitting. And every one of those employees is a person that they have troubles at home and sometimes alcohol and drug problems. So it's like a long, long list. And then I left and started my own company. I had invented a product that was kind of ahead of its time at the time, a biodegradable, non-toxic stain and odor remover designed to clean up originally if your dog or cat peed on the carpet. And
cool. Okay.
Weirdly, it evolved into becoming, a small chemical company. And we ended up making a bunch of environmentally sound type products that were sold in retail stores all across the US. But I was owner and CEO of my own company. So yeah, I've been literally managing people since I was 18 years old.
Damn. Grocery store would be daunting. And you didn't even mention the stuff like inventory and trucking and theft and
all of the above,
utilities and
the occasional crabby customer and unbelievable,
lawsuits. Yeah.
Lawsuits, just even a grape falling on the floor can be a lawsuit because somebody slips on the grape. I mean, yeah, it's just endless chaos every day. But when I was young, I had the energy and I actually really liked it. I was good at it.
And it does require a certain amount of control and order to pull that off. It's a must. You can't just be, haphazard with that kind of stuff. It has to be very organized. And then you got to call audibles, I guess, as things change.
Yeah, yeah. The plan keeps changing on the fly. That's for sure.
And what do you do now?
Well, so I sold my company in October of 2019, and I kissed the ground all the time doing that, not knowing that COVID was right around the corner. And the new owner has said the last 2 years have been the most challenging in the 65 years they've been in business. So, what I did now was I wrote out COVID, I wrote a book, I'm working some other books, and I'm talking to folks like you. And so that's what I'm doing right now.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a new adventure. I mean, I'm doing this podcast. That's my new adventure the last couple of years. So I get that. There's something very fulfilling about leaving behind some of the more conventional ways of survival and doing something new. Even though it's got some risk to it, it's really it feels good.
I love your website. I love your podcast. I love how you organize things. I love your logo. I think it's really cool. It kind of cracks me up. And I was
Yeah.
listening to some of them. And early on in my book, I had a really talk about another sort of miraculous thing that came out of nowhere. I didn't think it was possible. Kundalini energy just came out of nowhere.
Oh,
But my journey was just beyond belief for a period of time. And I saw one of the folks you interviewed was Lawrence Edwards,
yes,
who
yes,
ironically, he wrote a book probably 20 plus years ago. I think it's called The Soul's Journey. I
yeah.
have a subtitle too. That was really helpful to me when I was going through what I was going through because his journey was really similar to mine. And it wasn't that long ago. I actually talked to him via Zoom because I know he'd written another book that's kind of like the last word on Kundalini, and I wanted to know how things were going for him. And I, it's an interesting thing. The folks that have gone through that journey, it's so enthralling and exciting and terrifying and grace filled and all of the above. But when they start to fade, there's this feeling of like, wait a minute, where did it all go? I thought this was going to continue the rest of my life. And so that's exactly what I was talking to Bob about, or Lawrence, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I enjoyed interviewing him. What a sweet man and dedicated to what he does. It's really that's the one of the best parts about this podcast is I meet the most interesting people that I would never intersect with unless I was doing this.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people in the world, you don't see them on the media, but they're doing great things on on an individual and smaller group basis that don't get a lot of airtime. But that's the beauty of podcasts. We can find each other and develop this community of people that want life to be better for as many people as possible and offering ways to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, if somebody were to come to you, I know you do seminars and talks and things. If somebody they come to you and they say, I'm stuck the way you were stuck. I don't even know where to start. What do I do? Give me a place to start. Give me something to grab onto because I'm so stuck and my life has been very ordered and maybe rigid and I don't even know where to begin. This stuff seems very strange to me. I think it's bullshit, because people do think this way. It's like, it isn't quantifiable, a lot of it.
Yep.
And let's say I'm that guy and I go, help me. Where can I start where I'm not going to just go, and that's nonsense. I'm not doing it.
I think where I would start, if you're that guy, because I was that guy, Bob, definitely. I think I would just, what I would do is trust my intuition and start just talking to you, just like we're talking now, and try and get you to open up.
Mm-hmm.
What are you feeling? What are you experiencing? What's your life like? Who are you? I heard somebody call it the art of drawing forth, where you kind of use your intuition to ask another person questions. And so, the very beginning in my experience with the journey is uh, just feeling like you have enough trust or setting the fear aside enough to say, this is who I am. I think it's all bullshit. Great. Just being vulnerable and just tell me who you are and where you're at today. And that act of the vulnerability there, like I've always thought spirituality was bullshit because of whatever it is for you. I think just getting people to talk. And in fact, obviously I didn't do it really much during COVID, but I had groups at the house for probably the last 7 years in a group I just call Something True. And I would create a very safe, heart-centered space. And it originally was kind of an offshoot of a men's organization that I was a part of. And we would just check in. And the idea was no bullshit, open up, be as honest as you can, and nobody's going to try to fix you, change your mind or anything. Just be vulnerable, spill it all out. And that is a great opener, I think, for a lot of men, a lot of people. I don't want to limit it to gender because there's plenty of very rigid women too. And I think there's something, what I discovered was there was something beautiful about people being really honest with each other in a really open-hearted, vulnerable way. And I would see people every time come to the group just like, wow, I have never talked that way before. I've never heard anybody else talk that way before. I've never heard a man talk that way before.
Yeah.
And so I think the beginning is, okay, here's another analogy. Also, early in my days, I also had great disdain for creativity and art. Even though I probably was a really creative person, somewhere I picked up a message, probably from my Marine father, who was an engineer, that they teach in college is basket weaving. You can't get a job with basket weaving. And so part of the opening for me was exploring art. And Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, I still think is one of the best books ever written. And she talked about when you're a budding artist, don't go show your new art to your friends and family. Join a group of people that are supportive and encourage each other. Then sometime down the road, you can show your art to other people when you're ready, because there's a tendency to self-sabotage. And so that's the beautiful thing about a group where people can be themselves, share whatever they want. I don't care how much shit it is, how much beauty it is, open and vulnerably. And because the real world might not support that kind of communication. Maybe you get a little more settled in being able to communicate that way. It's hard to describe, but doors open, and that rigid rationality starts to find other avenues. In some ways, I don't think the rigid rationality goes away. It's like you become more resourceful, more whole, I think is a better description.
Yeah, I think some people are a little bit afraid of that side, and they want to stop the others from pursuing it. I think it scares them when they see it. It's like, well, what are you doing? It's not going to get you a job. What does that mean?
I can tell you my mother's not happy with my new book, but oh well.
She'll get over it.
She'll get over it. I think it's just a generational thing. There's too much vulnerability in there. Yeah.
I was talking to a guy who was a comedy writer and TV writer. And when he went to college, his father said, "What are you majoring in?" And he said, "I'm majoring in English." And the father went, "Oh, what are you going to do? Sell letters?" So he comes out to California and he gets a job in TV and he's making millions of dollars. He calls his dad. He goes, "Hey, Dad, you're not going to believe what letters are going for out here."
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so much for that kind of rigid thinking. It's just, who's to say that how following the thing that excites you it can very possibly and most likely will be the thing that makes you enough to live on and be comfortable with it.
I totally agree. One of my favorite YouTube videos is that Steve Jobs commencement speech he does at Stanford. And he talks about how, he was adopted, raised by very blue collar parents and was going to a private school that was very expensive. And he realized he was going to bankrupt his parents if he stayed there for 4 years. So after, I think, one semester, he dropped out. But he hung around for a while and started attending the classes he wanted to take instead of the classes he had to take. And he was just auditing them. And one of the classes he just fell in love with was calligraphy. Well, how are you going to get a job doing calligraphy? Well, it was that class that put the Apple Macintosh on the map because he was the one that came up with the idea of giving the consumer lots of different fonts to choose from because he so loved calligraphy. And that was the thing that differentiated the Mac from the PC. And he was, that's the same thing. You just don't know.
Yeah, you don't know. That's the great thing about it. It's
Yeah.
and to trust that because it feels right. I guess when you talk about intuition, which you did, cultivating that in young people seems to me would be one of the things that education should be about more so than actual here's math, here's science, here's history, here's all good stuff. It's all
Yeah.
good stuff. But did anyone ever say, let's look at intuition. Let's look at what that is. That had to be something you did separately at home, and sometimes you couldn't even tell your parents about it.
I totally agree with you. There's a quote from Einstein, and I'm going to see if I get it right, that said, "Intuition is the gift, and logic is its faithful servant, but we've elevated the servant and forgotten the gift."
Never heard of Einstein, but sounds like a smart guy.
Yeah, but I think even he just, he was kind of more fascinated. Why is it when I work really hard to solve a problem, I can't do it, but when I give it up and I'm like taking a shower, boom, the answer's right there. And so there have been a lot of brilliant people throughout time that have figured out that there's something beyond the sort of hardworking, rational uh, mind where the answers are right there, like in an instant.
Yeah, supposedly Nikola Tesla was like that too. He just would have these flashes of things or dreams or just
Yeah.
experiences. A lot of it came from, I read his biography, a couple of them, and that he had these terrible fevers and headaches when he was a kid. So he was really the sickly, isolated guy who was in dark rooms because of these headaches and light bother, all this crazy stuff that happened to him that was horrible, that changed, probably opened his brain up to these other abilities that he was able to harness.
Dreams are so multifaceted. There's so many answers available to people. And I had unbelievable healing experiences through dreams. And again, I never would have guessed that was even possible. I would have heard stories and went, yeah, yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll share one. It sounds really silly. I had had chronic neck pain for 6 years, and I had been rear-ended in a car crash, classic whiplash type injury, but I didn't go to the doctor. Thought it would just, it's just stiff, it'll get better. It didn't. It got worse and worse. And so I tried everything. I tried sitting on a bouncy ball at work. I tried standing at my desk. I tried um, acupuncture. I tried energy work. I tried chiropractic. I tried physical therapy, massage, ultrasound, and everything would give me temporary relief, but it would be right back again. And I even went so far as they did surgery and injected cortisone in the facet joints in my neck. And
Mm.
oh, it was devastating because when the anesthetic was wearing off, I could still feel my neck hurting. And I was like, oh my God, I can't, I was a really active guy. I can't believe I'm going to have to live this way the rest of my life. And I could barely get through my day. And so I had custody of my kids and was a single dad at the time. And I would try to come home a little early before the school bus dropped the kids off and take a little nap. And one late afternoon, I get in bed and I literally went, why the fuck does my neck hurt so bad? And instantaneously, I'm having this vivid dream of a monk with a shaved head and a red robe pacing back and forth at the end of my driveway out in front of the house. End of dream. And so I was new to dream work at the time, but the fellow I'd done the retreat with the year before had a dream forum online. And so I emailed him and the dream forum and said, I think this dream is trying to tell me why my neck hurts, but I don't get it. And he goes, that dream has everything to do with why your neck hurts. So I'm like, I still don't get it. And he goes, why does a monk shave his head? Why do monks wear red robes? Why is he pacing out in front of your house? I was like, I still just don't get it. I don't get how that dream is related to my neck pain. Well, maybe a month later, I have another dream, and Brew, this teacher who I had, was an energy healer too. He's walking towards me and he's going to put his hands on my neck. And I'm like, oh, I thank God he's going to heal my neck, you know. And in the dream, it turns out I have an angry old man who lives in my neck that looks up at him and says, get the fuck away. End of dream. Well, slowly, what he helped me see was, and I think a lot of people do this, people carry tension in a certain part of the body. And the neck is where I carried resistance and tension. And at that age and stage of my life, I was resisting everything. I was resisting death. I was resisting being vulnerable. I was resisting being broke. I was resisting giving up my rigid rationality. I was resisting spirituality. And all he said was, I want you to open to this idea that when you open to your feminine side, you're going to be more whole and resourceful. You have a spiritual side of you you're in complete denial of. Just open to that. And maybe 2 years later, I had another dream where I'm holding this giant golden thumbtack sitting in my office, and I go to put it in my bulletin board. I look over and there's a big monk standing over me, and I plunge the thumbtack right into his heart. And he's smiling at me with just this beautiful smile. And the neck pain was gone. Like, it was gone, just gone. And so even to this day, I now have conscious awareness when I start to resist something. Don't let it pile up in your neck. Some people carry it in their head, their neck, their stomach, their gut, And so I just sort of relax it away. And all this time I thought it was from a car crash. And it was just this, I was going through a really difficult time in my life. And boy, was I in massive resistance. And so a lot of stories like that in the book where I didn't know that I didn't know that I didn't know.
Wow, that's an amazing story. I love that. I was interviewing somebody and their point was that the body is the last place the thing shows up.
The last place what?
The last place the symptom shows up.
Yeah.
It's going on emotionally, stress-wise, spiritually first.
Yeah.
And the place in the body is important to kind of look at that. Of what that is. And, I used to have a lot of tension in my back. And it was always in the same spot. 2 or 3 times a year, it would, quote, go out. Right. So I was doing this series of hypnotherapy sessions with this person. And so it happened that one day my back went out. Which is, I'll talk about it. It doesn't go out. It's still there. It's it just tightens. Anyway, so I go to her and I tell her, like, I'm in tremendous pain. I don't even know if I can do this. I mean, it was hard to breathe. It was hurting so much. So I get in the chair and we do the session, and I don't remember much about it. I mean, you're aware when you're having hypnotherapy, but I stood up and it was gone. So it made me realize that it was not an actual physical problem that was going on. It was manifested because of some kind of a stress or a tension. So I was very, my whole sort of view of what this issue was flipped. And it was something that I had created in my mind, basically.
If somebody tells you that story, it's like, oh, okay. But when you actually live it, it's real.
Yeah, it is really amazing. I mean, I'm a professional negative thinker. I really mastered that. I could teach it, although I choose not to now. But
Yeah.
That's been probably my biggest obstacle is the way I think. Yeah. And the way I developed the thinking. Having to go back to where that started and why I felt that I needed to do that, because it's all this stuff is survival tools. That's all it is, that become no longer necessary. But how do you change them? Because they're really crappy habits.
So I think I'm a cross between a golden retriever and a cranky old curmudgeon. So I totally get you. So. But I have this conclusion that cranky old negative curmudgeon, he, at least in me, likes things that are predictable. I kind of was like, wow, if I'm like 3 years old and a big black dog bites me on the hand viciously, I might spend the rest of my life afraid of dogs or big black dogs or, and the mind will keep reinforcing, oh yeah, big black dogs, they always bite, that might be total crap. And so I think my mind was just reinforcing, oh yeah, you've hurt your back. This is how you have to, you have to sit perfectly upright. You have to walk, you have to stretch, and it might take a month before it's all better. Well, that is true. That's how it was, but that doesn't mean it's how it has to be always, all the time going forward. And so that's what I'm trying to catch myself is like, um, uh, and I don't always do it very well, but it's like, I don't have to do it that way anymore. I always did, but that's what I try to catch myself is like, I don't have to do it that way anymore.
Yeah, it's really interesting that as human beings, we always when we're disturbed or frightened, we go backwards to what we know rather than like push through it and go, this is maybe not real.
Yeah.
Those beliefs are so strong. I was thinking about some of the stuff my parents said to me. This is fairly harmless one, but my mother used to say to me, "You should never date a woman with red hair because they have terrible tempers." Where she got that, I have no idea, but it was a fact the way that she would say it. And I'm like, so I remember thinking that's got to be a real thing. I mean, it's fairly innocuous and I kind of didn't believe it, and I never really had that experience. But she must have had the experience or somebody told her. I don't know what that even doesn't even make sense. But, it can be worse than that, obviously. That's where really awful things get planted in children's minds and then they think it's
Well,
real.
there's probably thousands of those things that are planted, consciously or unconsciously, on purpose or accidentally. Yeah, it's actually kind of crazy.
Yeah. The other one my mother would say to me is there's right and there's wrong. And that was her, and you want to do the right thing, obviously, is the next step. No gray area, and that everything can be categorized as right or wrong.
Yeah.
And that's the control thing. That's the fear under that. Like, well, what do you do when something doesn't fit that? And I remember when she called me when I was older, and I had a really nice relationship with her, and aside from these odd things that parents say, but the first thing she would say is, after "how are you," the next question was, "Is everything under control?" And I remember one time just saying to her, "Well, I think that's an illusion." And she got really quiet. And then she goes, "Yeah, I think you might be right."
Oh, I love that.
It was so sweet. And she never asked me after that. It was just such a funny moment that it was just a habit.
Yeah.
That life is hostile.
Yeah.
Needs to be controlled, or what? Destruction, pain, mayhem. I don't know. It's a interesting way to live.
I definitely think that's been a big part of my journey is because I got a lot of similar messages from my own mother. And so it's kind of later in life. It's like, maybe the universe isn't that scary a place. Maybe that's just a perception too.
Yeah. I mean, there's scary things about it, but there's just as many wonderful things too. It isn't one thing that I've discovered that it's just one thing. Light can't exist without dark, and vice versa. And so, we can make, I guess the idea is being able to make choices about how we want to perceive.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, is where my work still lies in that. Can I look at something and maybe not judge it, or make a choice that's going to make me feel better, and not delusional. I'm not talking about head in the sand delusion. That doesn't make sense either.
Right.
But just to go, well, maybe, well, here's an example. Somebody says something to you and you get offended. Well, maybe that one wasn't their intent, and maybe it's really more about them than it is about you. They're putting something out is how they're feeling. That's why they're saying this thing. And if you look at it, it's like, well, that's about them. That's not really about me. So you don't get.
That's totally true. And in retrospect, that's always so easy to do, but sometimes you get caught in the heat of the moment. It's sometimes easy to forget, isn't it?
Oh, always. It's,
Yeah.
that reactive kind of thing and not pausing and kind of going, well, what's this really about?
My first teacher used to say, dreams help make the unconscious conscious.
Mm,
And, and so, a couple of the dreams I remember were like trying to show me how black and white my view of life was, kind of
mm,
right and wrong, black and white. And in the first one, I see like a little kid's top, like a dreidel spinning really fast.
mm-hmm,
And I can see as this top is slowing down that the top is black and white. And when it finally comes to a stop, it's a white top and has three black letters on it, WAR. And and so I remembered thinking like, oh, okay, so you want to know the source of so much conflict and war? It's that sort of rigid black and white thinking. And then almost like the next night, there was another dream where I saw like an X-ray vision of my physiology, and all of my musculature was black and white, and it looked like it was entwined in a really painful way. And so again, this was the whole beginning of seeing you have no idea how much you're limiting your vision and seeing the world in sort of a black and white way. And and the other thing I wanted to comment that you said, Michael Crichton, the author, wrote a book that a lot of people don't know about. It was sort of an autobiography called Travels, a nonfiction book.
mm-hmm.
And he talked in there about somebody had written an essay called Direct Experience. And the author was saying it's actually shocking how little what we accept to be true about ourselves and the world we got from our own direct experience. We got it from our friends or our family or our parents or our school or our church or books or the media. And he was so staggered by that, he decided he was going to go experience all the things for himself that he'd only read about. He wanted to experience for himself. And this is why he was kind of a door opener for me, had also had high resistance to anything remotely related to spirituality. And but he courageously tried all these different things he'd never done before, and so that was the one thing I would want to encourage people to do is question some of those beliefs that you have, question the beliefs we all have, and did it come from your mom, your dad, your church, your school, first grade, a friend, and would that be your experience today?
There's a great line that I just thought of from it was some Frank Zappa song, and all I remember was the line was, "There will come a time when you can even take your clothes off when you dance."
Yeah.
I just love that image. He was just talking about tight people. Let's do the title of your book again. I will do it in the opening also, but let's say the title of your book and how people can get it and how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, so the title of the book is called The Synchronicity of Love, Stories That Heal, Transform, and Awaken. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the platforms that are out there. You can get a hold of me at my website, which is John David Latta. The last name is spelled Latta, johndavidlatta.com. And real quickly in the book, the title I'm exploring, the more you open to what I would call divine love or unconditional love and the heart center, the more quote unquote coincidences start to happen, miracles start to happen, like a red carpet gets rolled out in front of you. And I love that word synchronicity because I don't think I even knew what the word meant 20 years ago. And I didn't think it was an actual thing. And the more you start to open your heart and go down that path, the more, I don't want to say things get easier, but it is this strange red carpet that gets rolled out, and more your life gets filled with what appear to be coincidences and or miracles, depending on how you look at it.
Thank you so much for being on the show. That was a beautiful ending to our talk, which I thoroughly enjoyed, of course. And folks, get John's book and have a fantastic day. And good luck on the book and all your endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bob. Pleasure being here.
Thanks for listening to The Exploding Human. Check out the website, theexplodinghuman.com, the YouTube channel, The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman, and The Exploding Human Facebook page. Again, big thanks to John David Latta for a wonderful talk. Please check him out at his website. Have a fantastic day. Thank you.